The silent cry, Captain Therne of the Zalthiathian Confederacy had spent 40 years music traveling the stars, and in all that time he had never once felt true fear. The galaxy had always been kind to his people. The Zalthiathians were traders and explorers known throughout the civilized sectors for their honesty and peaceful ways. They had no enemies because they had never given anyone reason to become one. War was something they read about in historical texts, a primitive concept that advanced species had long abandoned. But now, as Therne stood on the bridge of the passenger vessel Eternal Dawn and watched 3 massive warships emerge from the asteroid field like hungry predators, he understood that peace was not a universal truth. It was a luxury, and his people had just run out of it. The attack had happened so fast that the mind still struggled to process it. One moment the Eternal Dawn had been gliding peacefully through the Vidian Passage, carrying 800 Zethian families back from the colonial worlds. Children had been playing in the recreation areas. Elders had been sharing stories in the observation lounges. Young couples had been planning their futures together. It had been ordinary and beautiful and safe. Then the sensors had screamed. 3 ships, each 5 times the size of the Eternal Dawn, had appeared from nowhere. Their hulls were dark and covered in weapons that glowed with ominous energy. Before Therne could even issue an order, the first blast had struck. The shields, designed to deflect cosmic debris and radiation, had collapsed like paper in a storm. The second blast had torn through the engine section, and suddenly the Eternal Dawn was drifting, powerless and helpless. The communication officer, a young woman named Lisa, looked up from her console with terror in her eyes. Her skin, which normally shimmered with soft lavender light, had gone pale and dim. "Captain," she said, her voice shaking, "they're hailing us." Thern's throat was dry. "Put it through." The main view screen flickered to life, and found himself staring at a creature from nightmares. The Krillian commander was massive, nearly 3 m tall. Even while seated, his body was covered in thick, segmented armor that looked like it had grown from his own flesh. 4 arms, ending in clawed hands, rested on the arms of his command chair. His face was angular and cruel, with multiple eyes that glowed like burning coals. When the creature spoke, the translation came through clearly, but the voice itself was a sound that made Thuron's bones ache. "Zalthiathian vessel, you are now property of the Krillian Dominion. Disable all remaining systems and prepare to be boarded. Your passengers will be processed. Any resistance will result in immediate termination." Screen went dark. Around the bridge, the crew sat in stunned silence. They were civilians trained to operate a passenger ship, not to face raiders and warships. None of them had weapons. None of them had combat experience. They had nothing but their wits and their hope. And right now both seemed worthless. Lissa spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Captain, what does he mean by processed?" They did not answer because he knew exactly what it meant. Everyone knew about the Krillians. They were slavers and raiders who operated in the lawless regions beyond the civilized sectors. They took prisoners and sold them to the highest bidder. Some went to labor colonies, others disappeared into pleasure dens or fighting pits. The lucky ones died quickly. 800 people, 300 of them were children. Therne thought of his own daughter, who was somewhere on This ship with her mother, she was only 6 years old. She had been so excited about this trip, asking endless questions about the stars and the worlds they had visited. He had promised her they would be home soon, that she would sleep in her own bed and play with her friends and grow up safe and happy. He had promised her status report, Thern said, forcing his voice to remain steady. His first officer, a man named Kelvin with 30 years of experience, checked his instruments. Main power is gone. Engines are destroyed. We have emergency life support for maybe 8 hours. Weapons, we never had any. Captain, you know that communications. Lisa worked her console desperately. They are jamming everything. I cannot get a signal out on any standard frequency. We are completely cut off. The felt the weight of 800 lives pressing down on him. He was there. Captain, he was supposed to protect them, supposed to keep them safe. But what could he do against warships and raiders? What could any Zalthian do? They were merchants and farmers, artists and teachers. They were not warriors. They had forgotten how to be warriors centuries ago, when they had decided that violence was beneath them. Now that decision was going to cost them everything. Captain Kelvin said slowly, there is one frequency they are not jamming. Thern turned to look at him. Which one? Kelvin's expression was grim. The old one, the emergency channel that reaches human space. The bridge went silent. Everyone knew about that frequency. It was established centuries ago when humans first encountered the galactic community. Back then the other species had been terrified of humanity. Humans came from a world classified as a Category 12 Death World, the highest danger rating possible. Earth was a planet of crushing gravity, poisonous atmosphere, extreme weather, and countless predators. The fact that any species had survived there was considered miraculous. The fact that humans had thrived was terrifying. Humans had brought violence to the stars. They had brought weapons and war and concepts that peaceful species found disturbing. The Galactic Council had tried to integrate them, to civilize them, to teach them better ways, but humans remained stubbornly human. They still fought. They still competed. They still carried weapons even in times of peace. Most species kept their distance from human space. There were stories whispered in the dark corners of space stations and trading posts, stories of human soldiers who never retreated, stories of human ships that refused to surrender even when outgunned and outmatched, stories of what happened to pirates and raiders who attacked human vessels or colonies. The stories always ended the same way. The pirates did not survive. We cannot contact the humans, Lissa said. The council forbids it, except in the most extreme circumstances. Kelvin laughed, but there was no humor in it. 800 of our people are about to be taken as slaves. If this is not an extreme circumstance, what is? But the humans, Lissa protested, the things they do, the way they fight, what if they are worse than the Krillians? The looked at the view screen where the 3 Krillian warships were slowly moving closer. In 30 minutes, maybe less, they would begin boarding. His people would be dragged from their homes and separated from their families. The children would scream. The elders would be left to die. And there was nothing he could do to stop it unless he turned to Lissa. Send the signal. Use the emergency frequency. Contact human space and tell them we need help. Ambassador Kelvin started. Captain, this could what? Thern Interrupted, could bring humans here. Let them come, let them bring their weapons and their violence and their terrible reputation, because right now we need monsters on our side. Lisa hesitated for just a moment longer, then her fingers moved across her console. The message went out, transmitted on a frequency that had not been used in decades. It traveled through the void at the speed of light, carrying with it the desperate hope of 800 souls. Captain, Kelvin said quietly, if they come, if the humans answer, what will they do? Theron watched the Krillian ships on his screen. He thought about his daughter and all the other children on this vessel. He thought about the promises he had made and the responsibility he carried. I do not know, he said, but whatever they do, it has to be better than this. And so they waited in the darkness while the raiders closed in, hoping that somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, someone had heard their cry for help, hoping that the stories about humans were true, that they protected those who could not protect themselves, hoping that monsters could also be saviors. The answer from Earth Commander Sarah Reeves was reviewing supply reports when the alarm sounded. It was not the normal alert that indicated routine activities or minor issues. This was the old alarm, the one that had been installed decades ago and rarely used. The sound cut through the quiet hum of the bridge like a knife, sharp and urgent and demanding immediate attention. Every head on the bridge of the Titan's fist turned toward the communication station. Lieutenant Chin, a young officer with barely 2 years of service, stared at his screen with wide eyes. His hands hovered over the controls as if he was afraid to touch them. Commander, he said, his voice cracking slightly. We are receiving a distress signal on the legacy emergency frequency. Sarah stood up from her command chair. In her 25 years of military service, she had heard that frequency activated exactly twice. Once during a massive solar flare that had knocked out all modern communications, once when a first contact situation had gone catastrophically wrong. Both times it had meant people were dying and had nowhere else to turn. Put it through, she ordered. The translation software processed the alien language automatically, but even through the mechanical voice, Sarah could hear the fear and desperation in Captain Theron's words when the message ended, describing 800 civilians trapped by Krillian raiders. The bridge was completely silent. Sarah's executive officer, Commander Marcus Webb, was the first to speak. His voice was measured and calm, the voice of a man who had seen combat and understood its cost. Commander, the Vidian passage is 16 light years from our position. Even at maximum speed, it would take us 5 hours to reach them. By then it might be too late. Sarah finished. No, she turned to face her crew. They were watching her, waiting for orders. Some were young and eager still, believing in glory and heroism. Others were veterans who knew that every decision in combat meant choosing who lived and who died. Sarah had lost friends in battles like this. She had made hard choices and lived with the consequences, but she had never lost her sense of what was right. Lieutenant Chen, she said, send a response on the same frequency. Tell them help is coming. Chen's fingers flew across his console. Message sent, Commander. Sarah nodded. Then she opened a chant to the entire ship. All hands, this is Commander Reeves. We have received a distress call from a civilian vessel. Under attack by Krillian raiders, 800. Lives are at stake, including 300. Children, we are the closest human vessel that can respond. We are going to save them. She paused, letting her words sink in throughout the ship. I know what the galaxy thinks of us. I know they call us violent and dangerous. They think we bring war wherever we go. Maybe they are right, but there is something they always forget about humans. We do not abandon people who ask for help. When someone cries out in the darkness, we answer. All hands battle stations. Engineering, give me everything the engines can handle. Marines prepare for combat operations. We jump in 10 minutes throughout the Titan's fist. 3,000 crew members sprang into action. In the engine room, Chief Engineer David Park looked at the readouts showing reactor temperature and power output. He turned to his team of technicians. You heard the commander. I want maximum power to the engines, sir, one of the younger engineers said nervously. The reactor specifications say we should not exceed 90% for more than 2 hours. Park smiled grimly. Those specifications were written by people who never had to save 800 lives. This reactor was built on Earth. It can handle whatever we throw at it. Now get to work. The engines roared to life, burning hotter and brighter than they were designed to. Warning lights flashed and alarms beeped, and the engineering team ignored them all because they had a job to do. In the Marine deployment bay, Sergeant Maria Torres stood before her squad of 40 soldiers. They were the best fighters humanity had to offer, trained for operations in every environment from zero gravity to toxic atmospheres. They had fought pirates and insurgents and hostile aliens across a dozen star systems, but they had never fought Krillians. Listen up, Torres said, her voice carrying easily over the noise of equipment being checked and armor being sealed. The enemy we are about to face are bigger than us. They are stronger than us. They have natural armor and forearms, and they have been raiding and killing for centuries. She paused, looking at each of her Marines in turn. But they have never fought humans. They have never faced a species that evolved on a death world. They think they are predators. They are about to learn what real predators look like. One of her Marines, a corporal named James, raised his hand. Sergeant, the briefing said, there are 800 civilians on that ship. How do we protect them and fight at the same time? Torres nodded approvingly. Good question. We split into 2 teams. Alpha team secures the civilians and gets them to safety. Bravo team hunts down every raider on that ship and make sure they never threaten anyone again. Simple, clean, effective. She checked her rifle one more time. Remember your training. Watch your sectors, cover your teammates, and do not hesitate. The Krillians will not show mercy, so neither do we. We go in hard and we go in fast, and we do not stop until every civilian is safe. Understood? Yes. Sergeant, the Marines dispersed to make final preparations. Torres watched them with pride. These were good soldiers who understood what they were fighting for. They would get the job done. On the bridge, Sarah monitored the countdown to their arrival. The ship shook slightly as the engines pushed beyond their normal limits. Damage reports came in from various sections. Minor stress, fractures in the hull, overheating, coolant systems, power fluctuations, and secondary systems. Nothing that would stop them from reaching their destination. Commander Webb stood beside her, studying the tactical display. Commander, he said quietly, 3 Krillian warships against 1 human destroyer. The numbers are not in our favor. Sarah smiled, but it was the smile of a hunter. Marcus, when has humanity ever cared about favorable numbers? Our entire history is about fighting when the odds say we should not win. Besides, we have advantages they do not expect. What advantages? They think we are going to stop at a distance and negotiate. They think we will follow standard engagement protocols. They think we are going to be predictable. Sarah's smile widened. We are going to drop out of FTL right on top of them and open fire immediately. No warning, no negotiation, no time for them to react. By the time they understand what is happening, we will already be inside their formation. Webb raised his eyebrows. That is incredibly risky. 1 miscalculation, and we could collide with their ships or the civilian vessel. I know, Sarah said, but the Zaltheathians took a risk by calling us. The least we can do is take a risk to save them. The countdown reached its final minute. Throughout the ship, everyone braced for combat. In the medical bay, doctors and nurses prepared for casualties. In weapons control, officers armed every gun and missile the ship carried. In the hangar, pilots climbed into their fighters, ready to launch the moment the doors opened. Sarah took a deep breath. She thought about the Zalthian captain who had made the desperate choice to contact humanity. She thought about the 800 people waiting in the darkness, hoping for salvation. She thought about her own daughter back on Earth, safe and happy because people like Sarah stood between her and the monsters in the universe. Helm, she ordered, take us in. The Titan's fist dropped out of FTL space directly into the Krillian formation. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The human destroyer appeared less than 2 km from the nearest Krillian warship, so close that both crews could see each other through the viewports. The Krillians had been relaxed, confident that no one would challenge them. They were wrong. Fire all weapons, Sarah commanded. The Titan's fist unleashed everything it had. Railguns fired solid slugs at a fraction of the speed of light. Missiles streaked through space, trailing fire. Energy weapons carved burning lines across the void. The nearest Krillian warship never had a chance to raise its shields. The barrage struck its engine section and detonated with the force of a small star. The ship broke apart, spilling atmosphere and debris into space. The other 2 Krillian vessels scrambled to respond, but they were too slow. Human weapon systems were designed for speed and precision. Before the raiders could target the Titan's fist, Sarah's ship was already moving, rotating to bring fresh weapons to bear. Launch fighters, she ordered, prepare boarding teams. The hangar doors opened, and 20 human fighters poured out like angry hornets. They swarmed around the remaining Krillian ships, too fast and agile for the larger vessels to track. Meanwhile, boarding pods launched from the Titan's fist, magnetic clamps, allowing them to attach to the hull of the Eternal Dawn. Sergeant Torres led her Marines through the breach into the Zalthian ship. They moved quickly and efficiently, weapons ready, checking every corner and corridor. The ship was dark and cold, running on emergency power. Torres activated her helmet light and swept the area. Clear, she called. Alpha team, locate the civilians. Bravo team, with me. We are hunting raiders. The Marines split up with practiced precision. Torres led Bravo team deeper into the ship, following the schematics displayed on her helmet's heads-up display. She could hear movement ahead. Heavy footsteps that did not belong to Zalthians.